This podcast contains content related to child exploitation and criminal investigations. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The views expressed are those of the host and do not represent any official agency. All individuals discussed are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The screen flickered as the files began to download. Music, movies, and hidden among them, something much darker. That's how Brad Roberts was caught. Not in some dark alley, not lurking outside of a school, but behind a computer screen inside a peer-to-peer file sharing network. A place where millions of people around the world trade files every day. Some, maybe even most, harmless. Some, illegal. And some are the worst of the worst. When we took Brad Roberts to trial, he rolled the dice. He gambled. He refused to plead guilty. And when the jury saw the evidence, they sentenced him to 75 years in prison. 75 years. This wasn't a case about one man. It was bigger than that. It was a case about a worldwide platform. A program called Shareaza. A peer-to-peer file sharing network that most people, including parents, have never heard of. But one that offenders use to trade child sexual abuse material almost every day. Today, we're going to talk about peer-to-peer networks. We're going to get into how they work, why they're dangerous, and most importantly, what you, the parents, need to look for. Because if Brad Roberts, a sex offender, was using it, there's a chance that your child, your technologically advanced child, could stumble across it too. I'm investigator Sean Lacy, and this is Chasing Shadows. This podcast is about real cases, real offenders, and the digital tools that they use. But it's not just about telling stories. It's about giving you, as a parent, the knowledge to keep your kids safe. In our last episode, we talked about grooming. We covered how predators manipulate trust. Today, we're going to shift into the digital space. We're going to talk about peer-to-peer file sharing networks. These programs are often free, easy to download, and designed to look harmless. Heck, I even used one when I was a teenager. But they've been tied to thousands of cases involving child exploitation. We'll start with the case of Brad Roberts. Then we'll break down in plain language how peer-to-peer works, and why kids might be exposed to it, and how predators use it to trade some of the most horrific material available. And finally, we'll go over what we as parents can do to recognize these programs and protect our kids. Brad Roberts wasn't new to law enforcement. By the time I crossed paths with him, he was already a sex offender, convicted in another state. He'd already been through the system once. He'd faced the consequences. He'd done time. And still, he was back online using child sexual abuse material as a way to, as he put it, control his urges. That's something a lot of people maybe misunderstand. They think CSAM, or child sexual abuse material, is just pictures. It's just files. But every single image is a crime scene. Every video is a child being abused. And for offenders like Brad Roberts, it's more than just viewing. It's fuel. It reinforces their attraction, and in many cases, it keeps them locked into a cycle where the urges don't go away. The urges just grow. Roberts used a peer-to-peer program called Shareaza. If you've never heard of it, that's the point. A lot of these programs aren't household names like Facebook or TikTok. They're smaller, free file sharing platforms that allow people from all over the world to connect computer to computer and swap files. To most users, like it meant to me as a kid, that meant music and movies. But for offenders, for predators, it's a swap meet for trading the worst material imaginable. When I logged into my computer at my desk, I could see his activity. By the very nature of the program, he wasn't just downloading, he was sharing. That's how these networks work. If you're in, you're both a consumer and a distributor. A Commonwealth attorney during the prosecution of Robert's case said, "It's like bringing a dish to the potluck. You plan on eating, but other people are sharing in your dish." As Brad's computer was downloading files, he was uploading them at the same exact time, making him part of the chain that spreads this material further and further. When the day came, we interviewed a different man in the house first. It doesn't take a trained detective to realize that he was not our guy. He didn't have the technical knowledge and said that his use of his computer was to look at game shows. I mean, I enjoy Jeopardy, but that's not why we were there. But when we spoke to Roberts, he told me something I'll never forget. Sitting in my vehicle, he admitted straight out, "I know how Shareaza works. I know how to use it. I downloaded the files." He admitted that he was sexually attracted to minors of a very specific age group. And when I called him a collector and asked him if he was a pedophile, he said he wasn't a pedophile because pedophilia was dealing with prepubescence, and he was attracted to girls who were a little bit more developed. To know the difference was scary for me, because Brad had done the research. He knew exactly who he was, even if I didn't yet. It wasn't until he admitted to me that this wasn't his first time dealing with law enforcement that I knew that we were dealing with a serious offender. Roberts was already a registered sex offender. He'd been caught before, and here he was doing it again, back in front of the police, proving that this wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. This was something he couldn't stop. These were urges that he couldn't resist. He was a predator through and through. No penalty was going to change that. No prosecution was going to change that. Roberts refused to plead guilty when it was time to go to court. He decided he was going to take it to trial. He thought he was smarter than us. He thought he could beat the evidence. The defense tried to argue that the files were just in his cache or his temporary internet storage, that it couldn't be proven that it was him the months earlier that we had downloaded it. Even though the program was up and running on his computer when we executed the search warrant, even though he was actively downloading and uploading files, they tried to argue, well, it might have been him today, but it wasn't him 3 weeks ago. It wasn't him 6 months ago. Jury didn't buy that, not even for a second. The evidence was too clear. Our evidence was too strong. The jury convicted him. 16 counts of distribution of child sexual abuse material. And the judge had no choice. In the state of Virginia, we have what's called mandatory minimums. And Brad was looking at 75 years mandatory minimum in prison. 75 years. That's a life sentence for most people. It would be a life sentence for me. But that number reflects just how serious these cases are and how dangerous offenders, to include repeat offenders, can be. And here's the most sobering part. After I convicted him in court, Roberts was arrested again for a hands-on offense in the same city. It was alleged that he had assaulted a 9-year-old prior to me arresting him. He had moved from viewing to sharing to sexually abusing. That should tell you something. These types of predators don't stop. Possession of child sexual abuse material isn't a safety valve. It doesn't relieve them of the pressure to offend. It's not a way of controlling urges. It's just fuel for escalation. Robert's case showed us two things: that peer-to-peer networks are a breeding ground for exploitation, and offenders hiding among legitimate users trading file in the open is extremely dangerous. And two, offenders who are already in the system, already branded as sex offenders, they're still going to find a way to feed their urges unless someone stops them. And that's why these cases matter for me. That's why they matter for parents. Because your child, hopefully, may never meet someone like Brad Roberts in person. But they may use the same program that he used. They may stumble onto the same networks. And if they do, they may be exposed not just to the strangers, but to some of the darkest material on the internet. So let's talk about peer-to-peer file sharing. Programs like Shareaza, which is the program that Brad Roberts used. Back in the day, we used Napster and LimeWire and BearShare. All of these programs belong to a category that I've said many times, peer-to-peer. And if that sounds technical, too many ones and zeros, don't worry. It's really simple. Instead of downloading a file from one central website, like Netflix or iTunes, you're downloading it directly from other people's computers. You're not walking into a library and pulling a book off the shelf. You're in a group where everyone is trading books back and forth. But while you're downloading, someone's downloading from you, sometimes instantaneously, which means the files that are on your computer are being shared back with users from all over the world. That's the first obvious danger. These programs don't just make you a consumer, they make you a distributor. Even if you don't intend to do that. It's passive. Even if you think you're just pulling in a song or a movie, you're also sharing it back out with the world. Most of the time before you've even had a chance to look at what you've downloaded. And once that file is sent back out, it's traded again and again and again. You can't reach back out there and pull it back. It spreads instantaneously. Most kids who stumble on peer-to-peer networks aren't looking for trouble. They just want free music, free movies, maybe some free games or computer programs. And the truth is, that's what a lot of them find. That's why these programs are so popular. But hidden in the same network, where kids are searching for the new top 40 single, are predators searching for child sexual abuse material, and not just searching for it, trading it. And that's where the overlap happens. Programs like Shareaza aren't alone. I mentioned a couple before, and I'll mention a couple more. Names like BitTorrent, uTorrent, LimeWire, FrostWire. These are all variations of the same concept. File sharing hubs where anyone can connect, upload, and download. The programs themselves aren't illegal. You can type them in your search bar and download them directly to your computer in a matter of minutes. But they're dangerous because you don't control who you're connected to or what you're really downloading. And for the offenders, these programs are like gold mines. They can find and trade unimaginable files, blending in or believing that they're blending in with the millions of other legitimate users across the world. They rely on anonymity. They rely on the fact that the traffic looks the same. That to a casual observer downloading a movie, nothing looks different. It just looks like they're downloading a file from an IP address, even though they may be downloading a file that contains abuse. Parents often ask me, what do I look for? I don't know how these things work. My kid's way smarter than me. And here's the answer. Look for the programs themselves. If you see a program called BitTorrent or uTorrent or Shareaza or anything that looks like a file sharing program, that should be a red flag. Look for strange icons on your desktop. Ask questions. Ask about a program, and if your child can't explain it, that's a red flag. You might need to follow up on that. Take a look at the hard drive. Look for huge chunks of storage being used on a computer. File sharing programs can download thousands of files at once. A far cry from when it took us 15 minutes to download a movie or a song back in the early 2000s. If it's the family laptop and all of a sudden the hard drive's filling up overnight, that's something you might want to ask about. Look for folders or files with strange names. Offenders will often disguise CSAM as something harmless. They may disguise it as adult pornography. But even kids downloading music and movies sometimes get more than they bargained for. Pirated files often come with viruses and malware attached. They can even open the door for strangers to infiltrate and access your entire computer. And here's something else to know. These programs are often designed to run quietly in the background. When you start your computer up, sometimes the program turns on automatically. That'll keep the files being shared even when no one's at the keyboard, even when the computer appears to be asleep. Which means your child might not even realize what they've downloaded last week is still being shared back out into the world. From a law enforcement perspective, that's how we capture people. We actively monitor those networks. We can see who's sharing, what files they're offering, and trace the activity back to real addresses. That's how Brad Roberts was caught. His program was still active. His files were still being shared. And his digital trail led us right to the front door. From a parent's perspective, the risk is a little different. The risk isn't just that your child could accidentally stumble on the illegal material, though that happens. The risk is that predators are using the same platforms, and if your child is online there, they're all swimming in the same pool. Before we close this podcast, let's step back and talk about what we're really dealing with here. I mean, you've heard me mention CSAM. You've heard me describe it as child sexual abuse material. It's just a legal term for what people sometimes call child pornography. But let me be clear, that term is incredibly misleading. Pornography suggests consent. There's no consent here. These are not just files. These are children being abused, recorded, and then passed around and around and around and around. Every video is a child, and every video is a crime scene. And peer-to-peer networks have been one of the biggest drivers of CSAM for decades. At the height of LimeWire and FrostWire, studies show that more than half of the files traded on those networks were child sexual abuse material. Even today, torrenting platforms remain one of the top ways that offenders expand their collections. So what does that mean for you as a parent? What does that mean for us as parents? Well, it means you need to know the red flags. Like we talked about, look for strange programs. Look for those storage spikes. Look for files whose titles maybe don't make sense or have a bunch of acronyms in them. Ask questions. Pay attention to secrecy around devices. If you walk in the room and the laptop slams shut or the phone goes face down, they may be texting a new boyfriend or girlfriend. Privacy is normal, but secrecy is not. Be involved. Ask those questions. Talk to your kids. Lead with curiosity as opposed to punishment. Ask them to explain the apps that they're using. Second, set rules. We talked about some torrenting programs and peer-to-peer files aren't illegal. But maybe you put restrictions on it. Maybe you don't allow it, and explain why. Not just because of the viruses, but because this is the same platforms that predators use. I'll say it once and I'll say it 100 times. Monitor your kids. Be nosy. Know what programs are on the devices. Check their devices. Check the storage. Maybe keep computers in common spaces when you can. And finally, if you come across a file that you believe is child sexual abuse material, don't open it. Don't investigate it. Report it immediately to the cyber tip line at NCMEC. Report it to law enforcement. That's how we catch these bad guys. Brad Roberts' case reminded us that peer-to-peer networks aren't just about music and movies. They're for trading child sexual abuse material, and that possession isn't victimless. Every download fuels the demand. Every file continues the cycle of abuse. Roberts thought he could control his urges by collecting CSAM, but in reality, he just made them worse. He went from viewing to acting. And that's why understanding these platforms as a parent matters. Because the risks don't just end with the downloads, they escalate. In our next episode of Chasing Shadows, we're going to dive into undercover chat operations. We're going to walk you through an offender who traveled several hundred miles to meet with who he thought was a 14-year-old girl crossing state lines. I'm investigator Sean Lacy, and this is Chasing Shadows. Thank you for listening. Thank you for standing with me in this fight.